These two cards were released at exactly the same time. They have the same mana cost. They both require the player to perform a task a handful of times, and both provide 5 mana rewards for completing those requirements. The card on the left saw huge success in the Hearthstone tournament scene for over a year and a half, was one of the strongest Hearthstone cards ever released, but made players react like this.
Nice deck. I wonder why they're nerfing that card.
Meanwhile, the card on the right never appeared at a tournament, is widely considered one of the weakest cards in Hearthstone's history, but made players react like this.
Galvadon, the last Kaleidosaur. He's got stealth and a whole lot more.
The last Kaleidosaur, like all the quest cards introduced in Journey to Un'Goro, is a 1-mana spell that always appears in your opening hand. After you play it and then cast 6 spells on your minions, you're rewarded with this little cutie, Galvadon, a 5-mana 5/5 that adapts 5 times. Now if you don't know what adapt means, that's alright. It's probably Hearthstone's least intuitive keyword. But it's also important to understand it to understand why Galvadon is so Adapt presents you with 3 of 10 possible buffs to your minion. The possible options are Stealth for 1 turn, Death Rattle to summon 2 1/1s, +3 attack, +3 health, can't be targeted by spells or hero powers, Taunt, Wind Fury, Divine Shield, Poisonous, and +1/+1. If you look at that and say, wow, that is an underwhelming collection of items, you would be correct. While most Adapt cards were unsuccessful, there were actually a number that got a lot of run in competitive circles. Let's see if you can notice a pattern with them. Crackling Razormaw, adapt a friendly beast. Lightfuse Stegodon, adapt your Silverhand recruits. Gentle Megasaur, adapt your Murlocs. All these cards adapt other minions. Adapting a minion that is already on the board is a lot better than just adapting yourself, since those other minions can attack immediately. Gentle Megasaur giving +3 attack or Wind Fury to a board full of Murlocs can end the game right on the spot. Meanwhile, Pterodactyl Hatchling adapting itself just gives you a 2/2 stealth or something equally terrible that you would never consider running in your deck. This brings us to Galvadon, a card that adapts itself. It adapts itself 5 times, but it's still just adapting itself. Galvadon could become an 11 attack minion with Wind Fury, can't be targeted, and stealth, but Brawl, Sunkeeper Terran, Frost Nova, Blizzard, Doomsayer, Volcano, Devolve. Okay, so the card stinks. The quest requires you to jump through hoops, and rewards you with a very vulnerable big minion instead of other quests that give you an extra turn or make all your minions stronger for the rest of the game. But what if you have a thing against winning and still want to try to use this thing? Usually for these videos, I look up the card on HearthstoneTopDecks.com and see dozens of deck lists from high-level Hearthstone tournaments. For this, not so much. One of these is just an in-game deck recipe. It includes 2 Dark Conviction and 2 Desperate Stands, which is bold. It also includes the Vorax, which is... there we go. I had to sift through Hearthstone instead. Here is the top upvoted list. Oh, looks like this commenter doesn't like it. This list actually includes an interesting write-up by user Leolf for a deck that largely just tries to sneak the quest into an already good control paladin list. However, we might notice things going awry when the how to play this deck sections opens with the quote, "First of all, you need to understand that completing the quest is not the main goal, or the win condition of this deck. It's a win condition. And it's also a psychological sword of Damocles for your opponent." This is similar to the last one I showed, but I just wanted to include this tidbit. Hearthstone user Anger explains, putting all your bets on one horse is usually not the best choice. However, in this deck are many horses. Oh wow, and this post says, subscrindo to Chundo and join the Chun Discord, link in the description. Wow. For an actual Galvadon focused strategy, noted good Hearthstone player and Uther lookalike Brian Kibler put together this list that would come to exemplify future Galvadon strategies. Primal Fin Champion is one of the few cards seemingly designed to fit with the last Kaleidosaur by returning all spells cast on it back to the hand. This gave the deck some sustain by refilling your hand with Divine Strength, Silver Moon Portal, and Spike Ridge Steed. Spike Ridge Steed really being the star of the show here, a card that was strong across a number of Paladin strategies for how defensively efficient it was. But it's not like Quest Paladin making good use of Spike Ridge Steed was a surprise. It's kind of like Tron Legacy trying to save itself with that killer soundtrack. What becomes a problem with a lot of quests is that Galvadon makes the most sense in a mid-range deck, being a high-statted and threatening minion that can be played for only 5 mana. But playing the quest means your first turn you are essentially drawing one fewer card and passing turn 1, following a largely unspectacular showing in Knights of the Frozen Throne, see Dark Conviction and Desperate Stand. The last Kaleidosaur looked like it was going to get life support from the next expansion, Kobolds and Catacombs. Potion of Heroism arrives as a great spell to play on minions, providing a good buff and most importantly, draw. But the biggest prize of all was Linessa Sunsorrow, who provided another big payoff for the deck by playing every single spell you played on friendly minions on itself. It could get a few Blessing of Kings, a couple adaptations, most importantly a couple Spike Ridge Steeds to become a huge beast of a minion with like 11 attack and 16 health and Divine Shield. But instead of being a nice compatriot of the last Kaleidosaur, Linessa completely mogs Galvadon. Instead of always messing up your opening hand, Linessa is just a generally applicable late game bomb. So for only 2 more mana and no need to complete a quest, you get a better effect than Galvadon. Kobolds and Catacombs also provides Paladin with one of the strongest cards of all time in Call to Arms, a card that people would start including in Galvadon lists after a little experimentation. The problem is, again, if I tell you I can make some really excellent Gawumpki and then I just hand you a Nashville hot chicken sandwich with a little bit of boiled cabbage sprinkled in, it's not really what I told you. You can slap Kaleidosaur into a mid-range Paladin deck, but that doesn't make it a good Kaleidosaur deck all of a sudden. Luckily, Kaleidosaur was only about halfway through its time in Standard, meaning 3 more expansions were on their way to help the deck out. Surely, these expansions would finally make the deck viable. Hearthstone's next expansion was its most Halloween-y.
Shorty chose to be with a demon sounds like her problem to me. Ha ha!
The scariest part about this set was how Kaleidosaur got completely dunked on again. This expansion brought Gen and Baku, who would improve your hero power for the low opportunity cost of only including even or odd cards. Considering how strong the Paladin hero power is when discounted or upgraded, both even and odd strategies shot to the top of the competitive world. And while the last Kaleidosaur always starts in your opening hand, you cannot actually play it in the same deck as Gen Greymade. And since most of the good buff spells are even cost, Kaleidosaur is pretty much incompatible with the dominant Paladin strategies of the time. And Kaleidosaur actually got good cards in this expansion. Sound the Bells was a buff spell with the Echo keyword, meaning you can play it as many times as you want during your turn. Vicious Scale Hide provided a great minion to pile buffs upon as a way to heal your hero. Baneful Bunker also appears as a way to shuffle extra copies of Galvadon and Linessa into your deck. We see some lists try to get the deck to work with secret packages built around the value of Bellringer Sentry, but Paladin secrets are famously bad and are dead draws for a deck that can run out of gas fast. Alright, well that expansion was a bit of a letdown, but how about the next one? The Boomsday Project provided... Oh? No new buff spells for Paladin? But it did give Paladin the excellent Crystology, which allowed it to more easily draw Linessa, Galvadon mogged again. Kibler tries again, this time with a very complicated kitchen sink deck that includes Mechano Egg, Ziliax, and even Uther of the Ebon Blade. The deck has had a rough run so far, but it still has one more expansion. Surely, it won't be the worst expansion in the history of Hearthstone. Look, if you think that some card was going to see fringe play in the last Kaleidosaur decks while simply just being a better strategy that totally overshadows Galvadon for the 6th expansion in a row, you would be correct. Shirvala the Tiger arrives in this expansion, providing a nice recovery tool for decks that spend a lot of mana on spells, like the last Kaleidosaur. The issue is that it can also be hurled at your opponent for 25 damage. Holy Wrath Paladin was an interesting, high skill ceiling OTK deck at the time that had some success by using Baleful Bunker, to make sure your next card was a 25-mana Shirvala to catapult into your opponent's face. In fact, it saw competitive success in tournaments, achieved rank 1 legend multiple times, and even became tier 1 on Tempo Storm. Which is, again, a shame for our Dino friend. Rasticon's Rumble included cards like Immortal Prelate, which could spiral into something huge with all its buffs, and Banana Buffoon to get cheap spells to continue the quest. People even tried to get Spirit of the Tiger to work, but ultimately it couldn't even sniff the same oxygen that something like Holy Wrath Paladin was existing in. So, it's over. It's time for the last Kaleidosaur to rotate into the wild format. And if Galvadon couldn't make it in standard, things weren't looking good in this much higher power level battleground. The real sign that the deck was over was when in Ashes of Outland, over a year later, Librams were released. This was a series of cards seemingly perfect for the last Kaleidosaur. A versatile toolbox of effects focused on reducing the cost of spell that can constantly return to your hand. Suddenly, turn 5 Galvadons were much easier to achieve. And it wasn't even close to viable. I mean, Wild had decks like Darkest Hour Warlock summoning their entire deck of huge minions on turn 4, Quest Mage taking an extra turn, and Pirate Warrior blowing the doors off any opposition, fueled by 5 years of synergies like Patches, Ankar, and Ship's Cannon. Galvadon was hopelessly outmatched. Every deck was getting way more payoff for way less effort, and summoning just a big dummy that doesn't have rush or anything was even worse than it was when it was already bad in Ungoro. But what is this? Against all odds, the last Kaleidosaur made it to triple-digit legend and wild. Let's take a look at the list. What kind of Kaleidosaur deck is this? Where's the buff spells? You can't even come close to completing the quest. There's 0 spells you can play on your minions in here. So, oh, you just have it in your deck so you can trigger High Abyss Alora's spell burst to trigger the much better Tip the Scales. So it doesn't have anything to do with Galvadon. It could actually just be any of the other Paladin quests, and there's nothing special about the last Kaleidosaur other than that, it got used because it was funny. Well, sometimes that's all that matters when you're playing Hearthstone, doing something funny. It is a game after all. Sometimes
30.
you just play the deck that lets you summon the big dinosaur and be content. Thanks for watching.
Boom!